Hey everybody, my name's Christian Sellers. I'm the CEO of TESS. I wanted to share some great news that I received from Human Synergistics, our wonderful partners from Germany who've been helping me in doing leadership impact surveys in Rwanda over the last 6 months. So they've put together a report for me of all the surveys we've done. We have about 50 respondents, 5 organizations, 9 leaders. So pretty good sample so far. Still growing, so just showing some trends, but the general results are really good. What it's showing is that the leaders that we've covered so far are highly constructive. They have a very positive impact on the people around them, which is a really great result to see. If you haven't seen one of these graphics before, the graphic you're seeing here is the circumplex that Human Synergistics uses to describe how leaders have an impact on others or how they encourage behavior in others. And what you're really trying to do if you're running a change exercise or a coaching exercise in an organization is you're trying to increase the blue attributes, the blue styles, which are associated with much greater leadership effectiveness than the other styles, which usually have a negative association. So if you have more blue, you have leaders who are well regarded, they're having good impact. They're seen to be people who themselves carry their work really well and have a very good impact on others as well. Whereas the green and the reds are less so. It's the opposite. So I can talk a little bit about the results in detail. Before we get into the detail, though, let's just do a bit of a comparison with other countries. So we have here Rwanda, we have US and Australia on the top, and Belgium, Germany at the bottom. And what's immediately quite obvious from this is that on the blue side, at least, Rwanda is doing really well. It's a much smaller sample. As the sample gets bigger, it probably will be normalized. I mean, that dark line you can see on all of the circumplexes is 50%. So that's the average for the 40,000 odd people who the survey has been done for. So it's a very big data set they're basing it on. But, the trend could have gone in the opposite direction. So it's really good to see Rwanda on the blue being very good. And then on the red side, if you just have a look over there, it's sort of on average. That's not much different from Australia and the US, but very different from Northern Europe, where we tend to see more aggressive behaviors, more competition, more oppositional behavior, people correcting individuals all the time, which again, we see having a negative association to effectiveness. So it's great to see that that's not there. We do see some extensions on the green, and I'll come back to that in a bit, but particularly on avoidance. But in general, this is a really good profile from the data that we've seen so far. What's particularly good is humanistic encouraging. So this is the tendency of leaders to invest time in people, to train them, to encourage them, and to really show that they care and that they're making an effort with the folk around them, particularly their reports, but also with their peers. And that's at the 90th percentile for this result, which is incredibly strong. That's really good. On the flip side, the attribute where we have the strongest negative impact is on avoidance. So these sorts of behaviors are places where folk aren't willing to take risks. They don't want to stick their necks out. They certainly don't want to have interpersonal conflicts or do anything that makes them vulnerable, really. So this talks to a level of fear or level of apprehension, a lack of confidence. And that's strong. That's at the 75th percentile in this data as well. Now, what's interesting is if you're a coach and you come across a result like this, one of the techniques that Human Synergistics teaches you is to look to the opposite. So if you have an avoidant leader or an avoidant organization, you should look up and see, okay, well, what behavior could we substitute this avoidance for? And there we have self-actualizing, and I'll talk a bit about that. So if you can find folk to let go of some of the avoidant behavior and spend more time being self-actualizing, then you'd get a much better outcome. And the self-actualizing for our Rwandan leaders is actually pretty good. It's at the 75th percentile. So it's still, it's an impressive result. It's just not as good as some of the others. So if you invested a bit more time in that, what would that look like? So the kinds of things that you'd want people to do is to get them to encourage taking on more projects. So to some extent, instead of waiting in the wings or standing back or waiting for others to do things or being worried about the risks or negative consequences of doing things, what self-actualizing leaders are encouraging is they're encouraging people to take on interesting work and to really take pleasure in doing work well, gaining enjoyment from doing things, and also maintaining very high standards, both in terms of integrity, but also in terms of work quality. So if you can get people to let go of their fear and just grab the bull by the horns, try and do your best, try and kind of deliver excellence through your work, then you can address some of the avoidant behavior that you're seeing. So if I saw this in an organization, this is the sort of change I would be wanting to teach. And what I love about these two attributes is this is from a slightly different tool. This is from the leadership work styles inventory. So it's not exactly, human synergistics probably wouldn't like me making this comparison. But in that survey, if you look at the relationship between the styles and effectiveness, the one that has the strongest association with strong effectiveness is self-actualization. And then again, the negative defensive style that has the strongest negative association is avoidance. So if you go from avoidance to self-actualization, you can realize a huge positive impact, as opposed to doing something like going from perfectionism to achievement. If you look at perfectionism, that has a very small negative impact, and achievement is the lowest impact of the positive attributes. If you really want to have a big impact, then avoidance to self-actualizing is something that will change the performance of your organization dramatically, which is good. It means that there's some good remedial work that could be done for these leaders and organizations. What's also interesting is this model absolutely bears out what human synergistics has been telling us in every other country for decades, that those folk with the strongest effectiveness, so this again is a slightly separate part of the survey when individuals are reporting on their leaders and saying, how effective do we think this organization is from an organizational and personal perspective? In general, those most effective leaders have the bluest profiles. Of course they do. It's what you'd expect. But the Rwandan data is completely in sync. There's no special magic happening in Rwanda. The people have exactly the same experience with highly effective leaders being highly constructive, which is great. And likewise, the leaders that showed the lowest level of effectiveness in our sample had the most defensive behavior. And what's interesting is that the oppositional, more kind of aggressive styles were more prominent here as well. So we see more opposition, more competitiveness. I wanted to touch on competitiveness a bit because that's actually quite interesting. Competitive behavior is behavior where people turn the job into a contest. They're always performing for senior leaders. Maybe they're exaggerating their own work, or they're taking credit for other people's work. In highly competitive companies or industries, you see this behavior a lot. What's interesting here is that it's the leaders with the least effectiveness that are doing this. So it's clearly not working, but because they feel maybe they have a level of insecurity, they turn the work into a contest with their peers by always over-exaggerating what they're doing. So that's something, again, that with coaching, you can begin to get people to see and to address. The other piece that's interesting from this data and very different from what I've seen elsewhere is the difference between peers and reports. So when I've run these surveys in Australia, for example, it's usually the reports that are most critical. They don't tend to see the positive attributes of leadership. I mean, Australia is quite a cynical culture when it comes to authority. So it's not entirely unexpected. And then with peers, you have more collegial collaboration. In a leadership team, you'll generally have really positive, a lot of blue with the peers. And in Rwanda, it was completely the opposite, which surprised me. That, leaders are very well regarded by their reports. The reports say, this leader is very supportive. They help me achieve things. They build good affiliation in the team, and they're encouraging and work quality focused. And you're not seeing a lot of negative attributes. Whereas at a peer level, peers don't really see those positive attributes. What they see is they see avoidance. They see, everything in the defensive styles more elevated and a very small blue profile, which tells us something that, collaboration between functions or between peers or relationships between peers is not as strong as you would expect. So again, that gives us somewhere to focus when you're building an organization or trying to transform an effective culture across an organization. So that's basically it. Big thanks to Human Synergistics for supporting this work and for providing me with this cutout. I'll continue updating this as I continue doing work in Rwanda. But the takeaway message is, in general, Rwandan leadership is very strong. It's very constructive. It's having a very positive impact, particularly with reports, and a few things to build on, but it's a very good position to be in. Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more, just reach out to me. This is the kind of stuff that we do at TESS. Cheers.